Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles. It's great to be here with the plucky and patriotic paid subscribers of the Hopium Chronicles community. It's great to be with all of you. Your resources and your support literally makes this place go every day. So thank you for that. We're here. I've been trying to get together once a week more than we used to because things are coming at us so fast. And I try to use this event every week to help organize my thoughts to share with you instead of in writing in person, in the way that we get together. And so tonight I'm going to try some new stuff because I do think we're in a new moment. I think what's happened, the revelations of this, what will become known as one of the greatest scandals in American history, which for Trump is saying something, what happened with the leaked documents and the leaked signal chat this week, I think is really going to be a critical sort of early juncture of the Trump administration, a before and after moment. And so I want to try to share with you some of my thinking about where we are 2 months into this terrible regime. And then we'll get to your questions. And number one is that I do think that, as I've said, we have to recognize that coming into this, Trump had been uh, falling in the polls, that the faith in him and his stewardship of the economy, which was this central part of his brand, which is that with Donald Trump, you were going to get there. There are two things right now that I think are undermining a very critical part of his brand for the non-MAGA part of Trumpism. And if you assume that of the people that voted for him in 2024, about a quarter are not MAGA, three quarters are, and we're always sort of talking about that quarter that are not MAGA, that are looser or less intense voters of his, and for the Republican coalition in general, um, is that for them, I really believe that a few things kind of drove their decision to back Trump, despite all of the reservations they would have had. One is that with Trump, he was a winner and you would make more money and you would have better life for your family, and that he was surrounded by wealthy, successful people. Two, which has been part of his brand from the beginning, right? This was a major part of 2016. Everybody sort of saw him as a country club Republican and not as this fire-breathing MAGA, extremist, right, in 2016. But the second piece also, I think, was this thing that came in the early days about Doge and about Trump's going to run the government like a businessman. It's going to be efficient, and he's going to deliver results for the American people. And I think both of those things that I think have been very fundamental to making him look less extreme than he is and less like a madman than he is are both starting to erode underneath him in ways that I think are important for his ability to continue his hold on the Republican Party and on the public. Um, Number one is that we've discussed this before, which is that his ratings in the economy are the worst they've ever been since he's gotten into politics. People clearly have decided that with Trump, it means that we're going to get higher tariffs. I mean, we're going to get tariffs, which equals higher prices, which means more struggle for me and my family. This is having a huge downward impact on his political standing. In the Economist YouGov poll, I haven't looked at today, I didn't get to it. He had dropped 11 points since the first week in office. In Morning Consult, he dropped 12 points. His his job disapproval is very high right now for this stage, this early going. And his measures on the economy, he's underwater on inflation and the economy. He's much lower on every economic measure than he was in the first term. And I've told the story that in the first term in the University of Michigan Consumer Survey, in consumer confidence, it was always hovering around 100. Their measure was 50 to about 120, which was very high. Trump had very high consumer confidence during his time in office prior to COVID. Today, that number's at 58, one of the lowest ever recorded. So he's lost one of the critical kind of attributes that was important for the bridge to the non-MAGA world, which is a world, by the way, that the House Republicans, important to the House Republicans because they want to stay in the majority. And if that 25% starts leaving the Republican Party, the House will flip in 2026. And so number one is that he's already taken a wrecking ball to the American economy and to his own standing and people have lost faith in his economic stewardship. This is a big deal for him because this is the first time that that's ever really been true with Trump since he emerged on the scene. Number two, though, and I think part of what's happening over the last couple of days, and I think what's been happening with Musk, is there's a growing awareness that rather than them being successful business guys who are making things more efficient, that they're the biggest fuck ups that we've ever seen in American history, and that they are taking a wrecking ball to the American government, to our Constitution. They're breaking things, they're moving fast and breaking things that actually really matter to the American people and to the people of the world. And that all of a sudden, I think he's starting to look more like the guy that we all know him to be, right? Which is an extremist, madman, an idiot, all these things that we've all known about him that we see, right? That voters that perhaps didn't get to see during 2024 now are starting to learn that this guy may not actually be the guy they thought he was, and that he may actually be doing harm as opposed to making things more efficient. And what's happened in the last couple of days, we just had our first poll late this afternoon on the on by YouGov, a very credible pollster, and 73% of Americans say that what's happened with the Signal Gate, or whatever it's going to end up being called, is either very serious or somewhat serious. 60% of Republicans say it's serious or somewhat serious. These are in what the Post story that ran on this tonight did is compared these numbers to other recent scandals. And this is far worse than Clinton emails or even the Trump document case. This is already sort of in a place that will start to disrupt and change public opinion and public understanding of the Trump administration. People are really unhappy, as they should be, because basically the entire foreign policy team that this inept, inexperienced set of extremists, the ship of foreign policy fools that Trump and John Thune assembled for the United States that we knew were not going to be up for the job, have committed an extraordinary breach of basic fundamental security protocols. My wife was Deputy Homeland Security Advisor for Biden. I mean, I know a lot about this stuff. And, she had to go into the office and deal with SCIFs, and the amount of time and energy that responsible people in our government take to protect America's secrets. It's a significant undertaking. And they just ignored all that. And they broke the law. Every single person on that chat broke the law. And so it is, and also Pete Hegseth committed one of the most extraordinary sort of breaches of our security protocols in modern American history by any government leader. And it's my view right now that this would be, if we were in a normal time, it would be possible that every single person on that Signal chat would have to resign, including the vice president, because they knowingly participated in something that, and instead of saying, hey, we shouldn't be here, we need to be on the high side, as they call it. We can't be having these conversations about a future military action on Signal. That's not allowed. And that's a breach of our basic fundamental security protocols. If you notice from the chat, no one raised that. They all got on because they've all been getting on for other stuff too, right? It all kind of just rolled out. This is the way they're doing their business in insecure ways about things that are life and death situation for our troops around the world. And they all could have said, this is improper. We need to take it back to the high side. And one of the reasons they couldn't do that is because a bunch of the people were traveling, right? And didn't want to be inconvenienced by having to go into a SCIF to have these. They wanted to have the convenience of being able to use their phone illegally, illicitly to track all of this. And so to me, the most important thing now that has to happen, there's a sort of floor of accountability that has to happen. And then there's whatever happens next. Is that number one is that Pete Hegseth must resign. He knowingly and intentionally shared battle plans. There was no reason for him to share that information with the rest of this group. There was no reason. There was no reason for him to give this stuff. It's like he's a little kid in a candy store and he wanted to show off. And he's a fucking reckless, irresponsible madman. And he's a drunk, and we got to get him out of there. I mean, and it's been amazing to see the spouses of people who are serving in the Middle East. You can start to see the videos today screaming about how, Pete Hegseth put their husband or their wife's lives in danger because of this reckless action. He can't be trusted ever again to do, if he can't keep something like this secret inside the government, he can't be trusted with any degree of responsibility for anything ever again. And he must go. But the second person, in my view, that has to go is Tulsi Gabbard because she's the ODNI. She's in charge of intelligence and making sure that spies and all the stuff that goes on, she should have shut this thing down. By her not shutting it down, she participated in the leak. She was actively involved in the leak by not shutting it down. She was complicit in the leak. And she has to go, in my view, too. These were part of the original terrible four that we talked about that we tried to block, back when they were nominated. And it's very critical that those two in particular, I think, deserve the greatest sort of, I mean, whatever happens with the NSC Waltz, whatever, right? I mean, I think he's toast and they've sort of been indicating that, he set up the chat, he'll take responsibility for this. But we've got to get Hegseth and Gabbard out of the government. It's essential. I don't know how this is going to happen, but I will tell you that today I felt in Congress, Democrats were bringing it in a way in the last couple of days in ways that we haven't seen so far in the Trump era. And we talk here all the time about how little cracks can become big cracks and little wins can become big wins, and you never really know when things are going to sort of break through like this. But something happened with Democrats on the Hill in the last couple of days where the outrage, the sheer, particularly because John Thune shoved all these ridiculous people down the Senate's throat. John Thune has enormous responsibility for endangering the United States because of this reckless stuff that's happened. And so I think that I come out of this thinking like, we've all wanted the Democratic Party to be more aggressive and to do more. They operated in a completely different gear in the last 24 hours. You could see it in the hearings. You can see it in their postings. You can see it in their language. They're calling for Hegseth to resign. They're not saying we need an investigation, which is where we were 48 hours ago. We're way past that now. Hakeem Jeffries put out a statement calling for Hegseth's resignation last night. So we're seeing the Democrats, for why it took so long and why we weren't more aggressive from day one. This has been, I think, a huge change in us too. There's going to be a change in the perception of Trump and his competency and his ability to manage the government. And the fact that he's a crazy old man is going to start becoming more sort of common in the discourse of the daily discourse of the country, that he's not up for the job, which he clearly isn't, by the way. But then also I think our side, found an extra gear and an extra aggression in the last couple of days that I think is really, really important for us if we're going to blunt the damage that Trump is doing to the country and to our future. So I'm heartened by that. And I will say that tonight, many of you may not have seen this, but the scandal kind of deepened very significantly in the last few hours. Number one is that Der Spiegel, a German newspaper, was able to just go on the internet, found passwords and phone numbers and private information on the internet, just searching around the internet for Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, and National Security Advisor Waltz. Again, another sort of jaw-dropping, unbelievable security failure by the people supposedly keeping America safe. That alone would have been one of the biggest scandals in American history. Number three, the second part of this, number three, is that we also found out tonight that the um, uh, Venmo system used by many of these same people had been left open publicly, meaning that you could go in and see who everyone was on National Security Advisor Waltz's list, Venmo list. It was public. It's also true the chief of staff of the White House, meaning that foreign intelligence services were able to, and they all have this, by the way. I mean, the whole point about this is that they've made it easy for foreign governments to be monitoring the United States, to burrowing in to their personal networks and all the things that they do to sort of figure out how to get to these people, right? They've just left all the barn doors open for the whole world. And we know now that also the negotiator Witkoff, who is one of the most ridiculous figures in American history, clearly a Russian stooge and a buffoon, was in Moscow when this list started, and there was no like awareness that maybe we shouldn't be letting a guy like interacting with this group, while he's in Moscow meeting with Putin, and this stuff is on his phone, right? It's for people who come from the security world. This is literally impossible to believe that this happened, that any of this happened, how insecure all of this was. And given the machinery in the government, yes, it was a little bit inconvenient for these guys who want to run around, go to parties and be big shots and have a lot of fun and all the stuff they're doing and travel and do all this, right? Yeah, it's a fucking pain in the ass to keep our secrets, but that's their job. And they failed and they have to go. And there has to be accountability. And this is going to become a critical moment in our ability to create accountability when we've been unable to do that. The second thing I want to say, and then is that I wrote something tonight that I want to share with all of you because this is sort of my thinking about sort of. I want to explain what part of what hopium is for me. Hopium for me is, I ran a think tank for a long time, and the way that I described think tank politics is that most of the people in our business, the senators, the staffers, the House members, people in the administration, they're drinking water from a fire hose every day, right? And they can't think ahead, right? They can't think about next week or 6 months from now or 18 months from now. And what think tanks do is they are, in essence, the strategy part of the family. They think ahead and they have the luxury of having time and the ability to think ahead to help our leaders pursue policies and strategies over time that will make it more likely that they're successful and the country's successful, right? That's part of what think tanks, that's their job in this system. And that's really where I've done a lot of my work, both in political work and also in policy work, where I've tried to think ahead and look at the new challenges and how to put us in a place where we're more likely to be successful as a political movement. And so what Hopium is also it's a sketch pad, right? We're all in this moment of crisis, and I'm throwing stuff out every day, that I'm playing with, that I get up in the morning and I try to make sense of it all, and I share all that with you. And some of this stuff is going to stick, right? Some of it isn't. Some of it will just get flushed down the toilet or it'll be unhelpful. But you need to think of Hopium as like a daily sketch pad and a place where we're trying new stuff out and new understandings to try to create both a greater understanding of what's happening and also a more appropriate response to it, right? And language to describe to our fellow Americans what's happening in their own country. And so I just want to read something to you that I wrote tonight that I just is this is a sketch. This is a new thing that I'm playing with. It's consistent with what I've been writing and speaking about, over the last few weeks. But we have to, as a nation, we have to somehow say to Donald Trump, no, that we are not going to back his plans to make America poorer, less safe, and less free on purpose by design to make us less than we were. That we're just going to say no to the ridiculous tariffs that are driving up costs, harming our economy, and torching our alliances. We're just going to say no to aligning our interests with Russia and Putin and abandoning our traditional allies who've kept us safe, prosperous, and free for generations. We're just going to say no to the outrageous attempt to annex countries who are part of NATO and Europe and who are our allies by binding treaty, by the way. We're just going to say no to ending our support of the health and welfare of foreign nations that will cause millions to die, turn our country into mass murderers and global pariahs. We're just going to say no to illegally and unconstitutionally dismantling the federal government, unilaterally ending congressional mandates and programs for Americans of all kinds, and allowing Elon Musk and his rancid Doge kids to steal our private data for whatever use they're going to do with it. We're just going to say no to ripping apart our world-leading scientific and research ecosystem that's allowed American companies to beat out those of every country in the world for generations. We're just going to say no to the extraordinary harm to the health of everyday Americans that is going to come by cutting basic access to care for almost 100 million people, for weakening the vaccine regimes here and around the world, and defunding our cutting-edge research institutions. We're just going to say no to the tax cuts and the disabling of the IRS that will starve our government of needed revenue, create extraordinary deficits while cutting programs vital for the middle and working classes. We're just going to say no to stripping the rights and freedoms away of women in America that are common throughout the world and have been in place for more than 50 years. We're just going to say no to people being snatched off the street by plainclothes Ministry of Interior agents in unmarked vans with no warrants or due process and then being disappeared into an opaque political prison system. We're just going to say no to the vile profiteering off the presidency and ushering in an age of unprecedented corruption. We're just going to say no to all of this because this is not who we are. This is not who America is or has been or will be. Donald Trump is a betrayer of everything that's made America great. He is the worst American to ever live in this country in all of our history. And we have to somehow summon the courage to say no to all of this, to not accept how we mitigate the damage, but to stop it, to stop allowing him to make our country something far less than it has been for all of our history, which is this shining light for the people of the world. And I will tell you that when I speak to my Democratic allies and friends in Congress, and when I write, what I say to them, and one of the things that I say to them in my private conversations, is that the people of the world are wondering whether or not the Democratic Party is going to fight for freedom and democracy the way that they are in their own countries. And that we have this incredible obligation to get out of this defensive crouch that we're in and to learn how to say no to all of this because Donald Trump is doing irreparable harm to all of us and our future. He's doing irreparable harm to the most important idea in the history of the world, which is democracy and America, the way that it's been implemented. He's doing irreparable harm to the future of our kids and our grandkids. And we have to summon the courage to say no to all this, right? To not find a way to mitigate and accommodate and, play the game a little bit smarter, right? There is urgency for us to articulate a clear reason for why he's destroying the country and has betrayed us as no person has ever betrayed us in all of our history. We simply must raise our game and say no to all this. The urgency that I personally feel about this after what's happened over the last couple of days is greater than it's ever been because we already now know the level of damage they can do. We are less safe today as Americans than we have been potentially in 200 years. We are more vulnerable to an outside attack, cyber attack, an invasion of the country or some kind of significant event than we have been in 200 years. Because we are not here any longer with our allies. We are alone. And Donald Trump, this blubbery fool, believes that Vladimir Putin's his friend. And Vladimir Putin is humiliating him and mocking him and tossing him around like a rag doll in the corner. And he's too fucking stupid and corrupt to actually understand what is going on here. And every time that he's unable to stand up to Putin, he is putting all of us at extraordinary risk because Vladimir Putin is laughing every day at his good fortune for having this fucking idiot run and his ridiculous team run this country. So we have a lot of work to do, and I'm really pissed off. And it is time for us to continue to insist and demand out of our leaders that they do everything that they can, that they fight for freedom and democracy the way that Americans have fought for freedom and democracy for all of our history. It's our turn now. And we have to continue to put as much pressure on our elected leaders to do what's necessary now as we possibly can. Those are my thoughts tonight. Let's get to questions. Love you guys. I don't know why my camera does that, by the way. And let me know what you think of my little say no thing, right? I thought that was good, wasn't it? Okay, let me get to questions. There's no Lincoln tonight. He's off. He may be here, but I don't know that he is. And give me feedback on all this. And this video will be out tomorrow. Share with your friends. I'm trying every day, right? I'm trying to help figure out how to tell our story more effectively. And there is incredible urgency. And I think we have a new opening. I think we have to go on offense, as I wrote today. Okay, let me get to the questions. Let me just look and see and get a sense. A lot of good questions here. Let me pick a few here. I want to just say one thing about the daily onslaught of executive orders, which is one of the things we talk about here, is that we can't become, what is the line I use it, that we can't follow the new. I have a different line for it, and I'll try to remember it in a second. But what I mean by that is that Trump every day is putting out nine different things, right? Shiny objects, tariffs came tonight, the EO, everything else. And they're just throwing everything they can every day to, and what we have to do, and what I talk about here at Hopium, is that we have to stay focused not on what's new, but what's important. Because what he wants to do is he wants you to, oh, I know what it's called. It's chasing the new, right? He wants you to chase the new. This is a strategy that he employs. This is how they interact with all of us, which is they want to throw all this stuff out and have us chase around like a dog chasing a tennis ball, right? And in order to get distracted from the stuff that really matters. And so, they're going to be he's going to be issuing outrageous, wild executive orders every day. They're not bound, they're not binding in law, right? Law has to be passed by Congress, right? Like, and we have to, and many of his executive orders are getting defeated in court. And I think one of his strategies is that they're trying to literally drain our resources by forcing us to fight all of these things in court. They're trying to penalize law firms that are fighting them in court. And you realize that every time that we go to court, right? Not only are we having to fund the lawsuit on our side, but we're also funding the defense of that lawsuit through the government. Taxpayers, we're paying. So Trump, by doing all of these things that are so blatantly illegal and unconstitutional, it's an outrageous, impeachable, in my view, abuse of power. Because what he's doing is that he's actually using the fact that every time he goes to court, it's being paid for by us, right? What a scam that is. And so, and he's abusing it in the way that he abuses everything. And, because that's who he is, right? He abuses people and things, institutions, the country. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. He's he's an abuser and a bad, bad man. And so I want to say that one thing that is really important about what I do every day is that I try to bring to you, we're not a newsletter, we're an import letter. I try to bring you what's important every day. And the things that in order to help you not chase the new, right? To not spend your time chasing the 5, 6, and 7 new things that at the end of the day are peripheral to the central battle that's in front of us. And for you to realize that you're being manipulated, right? I mean, he threw out that executive order today because they're desperately trying to change the subject from what will be one of the greatest scandals in the history of the Western world, and one that certainly is going to make it almost impossible for any of our traditional allies to continue to work with us in any kind of intelligence sharing. I mean, the amount of damage that he's done, and how not only are we less safe because they were able to read into all the messages and hack into our systems, we're less safe because no one's ever going to trust working with this administration ever again. And so we're going to be blind now to threats because our European allies, what used to be the Five Eyes, these things are not going to function anymore if they think that by us giving them stuff, it's going to show up, in the Atlantic magazine, and sent there by the defense secretary, or be sent to Russia. I mean, can you imagine how the Ukrainians feel right now about the fact that, we can't even keep something like that? By the way, battle plans that are about to happen are kind of like the holy of the holies. And we can't keep something like that safe. Do the Ukrainians think that all the intelligence that we have and all the knowledge we have about what Ukraine's been doing hasn't already been shared with Russia? And so the gravity of what's happening here, we got to stay focused on this. And that's, and I'm not saying this other stuff doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter as much as the economy, what's happening with the economy, the tariffs. Read up when you were done here, read up on the tariffs that Trump just proposed. I want everyone to understand that because of NAFTA, our supply chains in North America are integrated, meaning that in Mexico and Canada, things move across our borders without tariff, by the way, in a binding set of economic arrangements that Trump himself renegotiated when he was president last time. So the current system of the way that we operate with China and Mexico is something that he actually sanctioned and approved when he was president last time. And so, but because of that, like automobiles, for example, there will be parts that will be made part in the United States. They'll go to Mexico, they'll get finished, they'll be sent back to the US, and another part will go from the US to Canada. It will get combined with another part in these, with their suppliers, because not everything is made, in the plants in the United States. And there is this incredible back and forth. Trump not only put tariffs on automobiles, he put tariffs on the parts of cars, which I will tell you, in somebody who has studied this stuff and has lots of understanding of knowledge of this, is, you know, among the most destructive things that he's done so far, because it's basically going to destroy the ability for America to make cars. And whether he actually understands all of this, and whether he understands that he's now basically guaranteeing that China is going to dominate the global car market, is, and again, taking an action that appears to be designed to hurt us rather than to make America great. It is this new set of tariffs that he announced, which, by the way, are already wildly unpopular, driving his poll numbers down. So why is he doing it, right? It's going to hurt us economically. It's going to hurt his poll numbers. And we keep coming back to this basic realization that Donald Trump seems that his central goal seems to make America less than we were, that's his actual goal. There is no question that his policies are going to make us poorer, less safe, and less free. There is no scenario, as I discussed with David Rothkopf yesterday, that we're going to be safer outside of NATO than inside of NATO, right? For example, there's no scenario where, if you haven't watched the video of the Tufts graduate student being snatched from the streets, and I'll be sharing this on Hopium tomorrow. So I'm a Tufts grad. I went to Tufts. I was on the board of the Tisch School at Tufts for 15 years. Up until recently, I aged out. And a graduate student, a graduate student, by the way, in child development, which is an area of enormous expertise at Tufts. Tufts is a medical school, a world-leading medical school, and it also has a very highly regarded child development programs, study child development. So a Turkish graduate student, a PhD student at Tufts, was leaving the main campus in Medford, Somerville, and was walking back to have dinner with friends, and she was snatched. And there's video of it. There's now 3 different video angles, one of them from a guy in his house. It was plainclothes people who came up to her, and they put her in a van, an unmarked van, and they pulled out badges. And as you can hear the guy in the window say, "I could buy those badges in any store. Like, how do we know those are real?" Right? This guy was yelling at the agents of our Interior Ministry as this young woman was snatched. And a judge ordered that she be held in the Boston area. They ignored that order and brought her down to Louisiana already. She's already been moved to Louisiana. No due process. She's not in touch with her lawyers. She's here legally on a student visa, a K-1 visa, I think it's called. And she's gone. And we have video of it, though. And when the agents realized that this was being filmed, they had masks they put over their face. So they masked themselves. So in addition to being plainclothes and just accosting her in the street, not calling her up and asking to meet with her, right? They just seized her, threw in a van, and took off. And the video is chilling. It is unbelievable. And I'm a Tufts kid, right? Like, I went there in undergrad, and this is a street. One of my Tufts buddies told me he sort of figured out where it was from looking at street signs and stuff. And it's a place that I've walked myself, and in the place where students live near campus. And this is now happening in America, right? Like, this is real. This is not a joke. And, what we believe is the thing that caused her to get snatched was not that she participated in any protests or rallies, but she wrote an op-ed in the Tufts Daily, chastising the Tufts administration for their treatment of the Gaza protesters, and said that, everyone, and so she wasn't a Hamas supporter, right? You know, uh, and so this is, we're in a moment of incredible. This is why there has to be urgency about everything we do, because the things that are terrible things are happening in our name, and they need to feel like that, as I wrote, that this is not okay, that we have to say no, that there has to be perpetual condemnation. Our political leaders need to learn how to condemn and to write letters of condemnation. I wrote about this several times over the last few days. And one of the things you guys can do in your home communities is that every town, in every state legislature can start condemning the activities of this administration, and having debates about them. And one of the things I raised the other day is it would be amazing if every Democratic controlled state legislature in the country in the week before July 4th had a debate around some version of the letter to America and their concerns about what Trump was doing, to bring the people in their state into a formal debate about what he's doing to the country, and then passing at the end of it a series of condemnations of Trump. These are things you can be working on in your own community. Cities can do this, counties can do this, city councils can do this, state legislatures can do this. This is part of what happened during the revolutionary time, the run up to the war, is that local states and colonies had these condemnations of what the Mad King was doing. There needs to be this process of us saying no, and it becoming and condemning, and there has to be like a condemnation canon, and we can't just rely on the courts. We've learned this, right? The courts need backup. They need someone telling the bigger story to help them prosecute these cases. And Democrats, I think, are too reliant on the rule of law, and lawyers, I think, too much. We've learned. We waited for Mueller. We waited for Merrick Garland. We have to stop. The courts have to do their job, but the courts will be more effective if we do our job and make this broader case to the American people that I was making tonight. Um, Let me get to a few more things. Deirdre asked, "Will I be participating in a in-person protest?" I'd like to. I mean, part of my challenge here is that Hopium, if I write it 7 days a week, it's 3, 4, 5 hours to produce this every day, and I've got to figure out how to go back out into the world. Like, I'm traveling for the next few days. Traveling is very hard. Like, I have to write Hopium in the morning and then run to the airport. I don't want Hopium to take days off. It's the core thing that I do. It's my contribution. And if I can start being in in-person protests, this is something we have to talk about inside the family. I have to find the right ones, the ones that are appropriate for me and that I feel comfortable in and organizing around. And I've been a little bit slow on this. I will admit, I'm in part because I think it's secondary to what I do every day. I mean, Hopium reaches 100 to 150,000 people every day. And if I go to a protest, right, I'm reaching a couple thousand people. And so it's important that I stay focused on the part of this game where I'm making the highest and best use of my time, which is producing the import letter. Um, the I just want to say there's Donald Trump's poll numbers are not rising. So I don't, and no one should trust any of the Newsweek writes like 3 different poll stories a day because I think they get clicks, but his poll numbers are coming way down. And he is, and I've documented this at length in Hopium over the last 10 days. Um, the So Liza asked, "Can you explain why you think 25% of Trump supporters are not MAGA?" That's sort of the estimate from people who are polling, and who feel that those are kind of rented folks for him. They're temporary. We've already seen him losing enormous ground with Hispanics and young people and independents who were critical to his victory. His coalition that got him almost close to 50% has already unraveled. He's now consistently polling his job approvals at 44, 45, 46, 47. It's not at 50 in any polling. So he's already lost ground. And also, if you look at some of the things that I've written over the last few weeks, you'll see that in many of his major initiatives, about 20 to 25% of Republicans disapprove of things that he's doing. So you see sort of a consistent kind of number of about a quarter of the people that voted for him are not MAGA. They're not ideologically MAGA. They're not, this would make sense. We know people like this. All of us know people who voted for Trump and who are not MAGA people, right? And so I think that part of our focus has to be that we have to stay relentlessly focused on peeling off at that 25, that 20 to 25%. And, they can't keep the house unless they hold on to all that, right? And they have a tenuous hold in the house. And I will say that one of the things that all of you should be thinking about is, and we've been writing about this a lot, is that whether it's in-person protests or that people are doing Tesla takedowns, the indivisible events that are coming up soon. One of the things I'm very encouraged by is that a lot of these protests are happening or being organized locally. It's not a national group coming in and organizing it for people. People are taking the initiative and doing this work, which I think will make this more sustainable and successful over time. And so I'm very encouraged as we move from the early days of the opposition, now that we're moving outside as it's getting warmer. We have to, as I wrote the other day, we have to be able to do both. We have to keep the calls going on into the offices because at the end of the day, that stuff really, really matters. And as I've said, the calls matter not just because people hear them, but because if they don't get calls, they understand there's an absence and they record that too, meaning that they think the intensity of opposition has dissipated. So if you have the luxury of being able to make calls to your senators and representatives every day, you should do it every day. I mean, it should just be a thing you do, like working out or reading the newspaper. You put 15 minutes aside to make your calls, write your emails, whatever you do, local offices, the DC offices. It's critical that we continue to be in their face and continue, Democrats and Republicans, by the way, that we're continuing to demand that they do more to challenge the wrecking ball, the Trumpian wrecking ball. Um, yeah, I think that one of the things we've talked about a lot is that, generally these offices discount uh, contacts that come from outside the district or the state. And so, they don't record them. It's like they don't happen, right? They may, you may feel good and that you may get a person or you may write a letter, but the stuff that they listen to are the people from in-state and in district. That's the stuff that really has the biggest impact on these offices. And that's why I've been sort of not discouraging, but I don't think, calling Schumer and, if you don't live in New York and, calling other folks who are not your senators and representatives, there's limited utility in that. It's not that it's not important. It's just that I don't know how much of an impact it really has in these offices. Um, Let me go down. Yeah, I mean, Judge Crawford, it's a close race. I mean, the early vote, I want to thank Arctic Stones, who's a character with his funny name on Opium for continuing to bring data in. The early vote is encouraging, but look, we all know this. It's just a close race. I mean, it's like 2024. I mean, 2024 was close and it could go either way, and we just have to keep fighting. And I'm really grateful to all of you who've contributed. I hope you watched the Ben Wickler video today. It was a really cool video. If you haven't, please watch it. Ben is a dear friend. Ben is authentically grateful for what we've done to help him. We were very involved in us winning the Supreme Court race 2 years ago. It was the first major Hopium project after we launched in March of 2023. Ben was the very first speaker that Hopium ever had 2 years ago. So he's aware of what we can do and grateful for it. So please do watch the video if you can. Naomi asked, what's it going to take to get a letter to America? I think we're getting closer to that. I think that, as I said today, I'm more optimistic that somehow something happened inside inside our family here in Washington in the last couple of days. Because I think that people like Jim Himes and Adam Smith and Mark Warner and the people who've been inside the intelligence and national security world were legitimately scared about what happened. I mean, they were legitimately terrified for the security and safety of the country and for all of us, because this is such a profound breach, of the basic protocols about how this stuff all works. And the fact that so many people were participating in it, and now that we know that they also left their Venmos open, and that we also know they left their other passwords open, and all this stuff, these are like the basic stuff that any 23-year-old kid at the CIA gets trained on. And here we have the people responsible for keeping us safe, unable to execute sort of the fundamental things to keep their own activities from being seen by hostile foreign powers. And the question obviously gets raised about whether they did this on purpose to make it visible to a country like Russia or China, right? That this was actually something traitorous and treasonous. I don't think it's out of the realm of the possible because it's so insane that it happened, and that you have to wonder what is really going on here, and that's why you heard the outrage from Jim Himes and from Mark Warner and from the others that have been in, thank God we had these hearings in the last 24 hours. And it's obvious that many of these folks, Ratcliffe and Tulsi Gabbard, lied under oath in the last, couple of days. And so, we have a lot of work to do here. I mean, this is a moment of accountability. I really do think Democrats are really going to drive this. And I think that for those of you who wanted to see the Democrats in Washington fight a lot harder, I think we're there now, and we have to keep encouraging them. If you live in places where your representative did a really good job in the last couple of days, call them tomorrow and thank them. I mean, the calls of thanks matter as much as the calls where we're insisting they do things. People need to hear when they've done, people need to hear from their constituents that they're happy with their work. It incentivizes them to do more. And so that's as important as any of the things that we do where we're suggesting that people aren't doing enough, you know? Um, Let me look at other questions. Um, a lot of really good questions. Please send your say no to all of us, Jane. I will include it tomorrow, and also because I released this video tomorrow, so I'll include it as a companion. And just, you know, all of you are paid subscribers, right? So give, weigh in tomorrow on it so others can see. I mean, you guys had the luxury of seeing me do this tonight. Others tomorrow will be engaging with the chat. Dive in and say, listen, this thing Simon did last night's really interesting. People should listen to it and pay attention, and let's have a conversation about it over the next couple of days, right? I want to get, more feedback from more people on it. And yeah, I mean, it is important to me, and again, part of my job, right, is I sketch, I test, I soften ground for others to come follow. Um, Let me just look at other questions. Oh, the Florida races. I wanted to say that let me now do like Washington, D.C. political talk, right? There are a lot of people right now who are having conversations with all of us who are people that have not worked on campaigns and been in the game. And that in some cases makes them really good and important in their voices because they're not part of the system. They're outside the system, right? And we need both the insiders like me and the people that are not part of the system having this rollicking discussion and debate every day, right? Because as I wrote on Hopium the other day, and I want to state this, and I need to actually make a video about what I'm about to say, is that I really view our party and our family as if we are all playing different positions on the same team, meaning that my job is not the same job as Midas Touch or Jessica Craven, right? I have my job to do. And what's important, so I'm like the first baseman and they're like the third baseman, and but the point is that we're all equal, that we're all valuable, that we all may not agree with each other, but our views are valid. And because we don't really know what to do. And what we need to do is we need to foster a discussion, a debate that's respectful every day to learn from one another. Part of the reason I think Hopium is successful is that I learn from all of you every day on the chat. The amount of learning that I do about what's on your minds, what matters to you. I read every single post. I don't respond to everyone, but I read every one every day. And the amount of learning I do from people all over the country, testing stuff out, sharing articles. I'm blessed to get to have all of you be talking to me every day about what you're seeing out there. And that feedback loop is, I think, what makes me better and more effective every day. And so thank you for that. That's why the self-reporting and the sharing really matters, because you're also sharing that with other people too, and it may affect what they're doing, right? So I wanted to say that the great challenge we have now going forward, I think, and as somebody who's been inside this kind of party politics and coalitions for a long time, is that we have to view everyone in our family has to be viewed with respect. Everyone is playing a different position on the same team. And it may be that you don't agree with this person over there, or you think these guys are kind of fucking up and doing bad stuff. But we need to approach the internal conversation with respect and dignity, the way that I try to do internally at Hopium, right? Where every moment that you engage, you have to take responsibility for the sentiment you're putting out in the world, and that you lift people up and not tear them down. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of, there are people in this family that I don't agree with, that ideologically I'm not comfortable with, but you haven't seen me ever go after anybody here, right? I try to spend every engagement I have with you to lift people up. I don't spend my time pushing people down, right? And denigrating. And the key to us going forward is that we cannot have good Democrats and bad Democrats. There can't be people that are good and people that are bad. Because if that happens, that's factionalization. That's creating hierarchy. We're not then all different playing different positions in the same team. We're creating a hierarchy of good and bad based on whatever criteria, right? And when you do that, that means that you are starting to fall into faction, right? Where my team is better than your team. We're not on the same team anymore. And if that happens, we're going to lose. And so part of what I hope is that part of being a Hopium person is that you bring this sentiment of playing different positions on the same team and recognizing that Bernie has his job and AOC has her job and Chuck Schumer has his job and Senator so and so has their job. We just want everyone in our family to be doing the very best every day and leaving it all on the playing field, whatever that is every day, as opposed to being so quick to judgment. And I know that this is also something I'm saying as a dad who's raised three kids and who's no longer young anymore. And this may sound pie in the sky and Pollyannish. Well, Simon, clearly Senator so and so is bad and doing bad things, and I'm going to spend my time trashing them instead of trashing Trump. But every time you trash Senator so and so, you're not trashing Trump. You're not using the energy that you have to communicate to people in your networks about the real threat. And yes, so what I'm saying to everyone here is that I want, as part of us going out into the world, and somebody had a great post the other day, which is, Simon, you need to create t-shirts and hats so when we go to the rallies, we can meet other Hopium people and identify as Hopium people in these events. And I will do that. This is something I was going to do in a few months, but I'm going to accelerate that now that people are going out into the world and create some very simple kind of merch, right, that you guys can buy cheaply. I'm not going to charge big markup on it. I mean, you all give me money already, right? Um, and um, and but I just want to say as a close here that our greatest challenge is to stay focused on what's important. And what's important is that he's destroying the country. We have to stop him. And there are going to be people along the way that are going to disappoint us. And my advice to you is you can't spend time and energy on that. You have to anticipate it. You have to expect it, right? And you have to work with the people that are making a difference, that are moving things forward, that are pushing us down the playing field every day. Because those people who are failing now or faltering, tomorrow they could get their shit together and come back in and start adding a lot of value, right? We need more people. We don't need less, right? We didn't win this last election. We don't have the luxury of pushing people out of our family right now. We need to expand our coalition. And so be forgiving, right? Anticipate that you're going to be disappointed. Don't become what I talk about here at Hopium about being perpetually disappointed. It's self-indulgent, right? This is really hard, and not everyone's going to get it right. But Bill Clinton, when I worked for him, had a line that he described his opponents as people who were not yet supporters, right? If you think about that, right? And we have to think about when you think of Senator so and so who you don't like, think of them not as like a bad person, but as somebody that you haven't been able to get them on the right side of you yet. Because look, for us to defeat Trump, we're going to need some of these Republican senators and Republican House members to break from him. We're going to need to create common cause with Republicans in order to block his agenda. And so we have to be constantly. In my very first presidential campaign, one of my mentors and teachers said, presidential politics is a game of addition. It's not a game of subtraction. And we have to be adding and growing our movement at all times. I need you to help me also grow Hopium, right? I mean, make Hopium. I had a great moment tonight that I'll end with as a way to close. I was at this event with Corey, Senator Booker was a fundraiser for him. He's in cycle. He's not going to have a serious race, but he's a great senator and been an old friend. I helped raise money for the very first time he ran for city council a long time ago now. I've known Corey for a long time. And there was somebody there who is a prominent Democratic staffer in town, who pulled me aside, and I hadn't seen her in a while. And she said, I was asked by a member of Congress to come in and sort of brainstorm about how to manage the moment. And she said, and this is somebody, by the way, I haven't spoken to I mean, at least a year, right? In either text or calls or anything else. She said, you should see what Simon Rosenberg does every day at Hopium, and the way at the end of his email every day, he lists all these things that we should be doing. She said, that's a great place for you to start. And this is a person who's a friend of mine who I've known for a long time. I had no idea she was a Hopium subscriber. She's a very influential person in this city. And so she, in a meeting with a member of Congress, said, you want to go figure out how to be more effective? You should just read Hopium every day and see what they're doing there. And I was so like, I was like, wow, that's really, I sort of know these things are happening, right? But when you hear it from a good person, an influential person, a good human, and who was in a meeting with an unnamed congressperson, gaming out war planning, and that she was recommending to hang out with us to learn how to do what they were doing. Hey guys, that was pretty cool, and I think we are making a big difference here. And I'm just really grateful and blessed for this opportunity to be working with you every day. One of the reasons I don't want to travel or go do the rallies is that I get up every morning, and when I'm writing, I'm with you, right? Like I am in this community thinking of all of you. And what motivates me is that I want to do my best for you every day. I try to do my best every day. And I take this so seriously because the moment requires it. And so you should all know that I'm the lucky one here, right? I'm the lucky one that has the support of all of you, financial, political, and everything else, that is allowing me to do this work and to be in community with you and to know that we're making a difference. I think what we all want in this moment of crisis, to feel like our work matters, and our work here matters. And it's because of all of you that this is possible. And so thank you all so much. Have a great night. And do weigh in on the email tomorrow, the Hopium post when it comes tomorrow. Share this video with others and keep fighting hard, everybody, because our future, our freedoms, our families, and our future are on the line here. And we've got to leave it all on the playing field for all of them. Thanks.